Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into some serious global power play today, folks. President-elect Trump's cabinet picks and what they might mean for U.S.-China relations. Buckle up, because we've got three really interesting sources to unpack. We've got an article from NDTV. They're focused on Mike Waltz, the new national security advisor. And then there's Live Mint. They're diving into this whole Reliance-Disney merger and the launch of Geostar. Plus, we've got the Times of India, and they're analyzing Trump's picks, Waltz, and maybe Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, and what they signal about a potential new era in U.S.-China relations. Big questions, right? Like, are we seriously on the brink of another U.S.-China clash? And what does a Geostar website have to do with any of it? That's what you're here to find out.
You hit the nail on the head with that new era idea. The reactions to these appointments, I mean, it's worldwide. Everyone from Beijing to Brussels, they're all trying to figure out what this means for the balance of power. It's already kind of shaky.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get specific. Who are the big players in this whole thing?
Okay, so obviously Trump's back in the White House, but this time he's got some serious China critics in his corner. Like Mike Waltz, the new national security advisor. He's a retired Army colonel, former Green Beret even. And right now, he's a congressman, and get this, he's the co-chair of the India Caucus. That tells you something right there about his stance on U.S.-India relations.
And then you've got Marco Rubio, the senator. He's been super hawkish on China consistently. Like, he's been a vocal critic of their human rights record. He even got sanctioned by Beijing for his stance on Hong Kong and Xinjiang. And it's not just talk. He's actually sponsored legislation to sanction Chinese officials and businesses over those abuses.
Yeah, he's not messing around. And having people like Waltz and Rubio in such key positions, it definitely suggests a shift, right? A much tougher U.S. stance on China. Kind of makes you wonder if U.S. foreign policy is changing, even compared to Trump's first term.
It seems like it, for sure. Remember the trade war from his first term? This time he's talking about tariffs, like 60% on Chinese goods. That's not just a nudge, that's a full-on economic earthquake.
And the fallout from that. Massive. UBS analysts are predicting it could cut China's GDP growth in half within a year.
Whoa, that's a serious blow. So how's China handling all this?
They're being smart about it. They know a head-on collision with the U.S. helps no one, so they're trying to find ways to engage with the new administration. But at the same time, they're getting ready for the worst.
So like bracing for impact, but keeping the door open for diplomacy. Tricky balance. But if those tariffs hit, how are they planning to soften the blow economically?
Diversification's the key.
Yeah.
They're working on moving away from relying solely on the U.S. market, trying to diversify their trade routes. Plus, they're looking to boost domestic consumption, hoping a strong internal market can help absorb the shock of any trade restrictions. Kind of like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Right. Spread the risk. But let's be real, they're still heavily dependent on exports, especially to the U.S. If those tariffs happen, they're going to feel it.
No doubt about it. And it's not just economics. This tension spills over into geopolitics, too, with Taiwan becoming a real flashpoint.
Right. Absolutely. And Trump's appointments seem to be adding fuel to the fire. His past comments about Taiwan's defense contributions, plus these cabinet picks, it's definitely making Beijing nervous.
And this is where strategic ambiguity comes in. It's been a key part of U.S. policy toward Taiwan for decades. Basically, the U.S. intentionally keeps things a bit vague about how they'd respond to a Chinese attack on Taiwan. It's this calculated ambiguity that's helped maintain a fragile peace in the region. But then, during Biden's last term, he seemed to kind of move away from that, made some pretty strong statements about defending Taiwan.
And now Trump's back, and he's unpredictable. Nobody really knows where he stands. That uncertainty alone is dangerous. It could embolden China to get more aggressive.
It's like walking through a minefield blindfolded, one wrong step, and boom.
Exactly. And then, just to throw another wrench in the works, we've got this Geostar development.
Oh, yeah. The Reliance-Disney merger and that whole Geostar website popping up. Seems like just a business story, but it's actually tied into this U.S.-China dynamic in a big way.
So break it down for us. The Reliance-Disney deal is huge, $8.5 billion, the biggest merger ever in Indian media and entertainment. And then, bam, this Geostar website appears, hinting at a possible new global media giant.
And all this is happening right as U.S. policy toward China might be shifting. It's not a coincidence. It tells you the whole global landscape is changing. New players like India are stepping up, maybe even challenging the old order.
So while the U.S. and China are facing off, others are making the moves, changing the game. It's like high-stakes poker. Everyone's bluffing, and the stakes just keep getting higher.
Exactly. To really understand where this is going, we need to look closer at China's strategy for Trump 2.0. And think about the role of wild cards like Elon Musk.
Now that's a cliffhanger. We'll explore all that right after this.
So we've got this, potential powder keg between the U.S. and China. But China's not just sitting around waiting. They're getting ready for Trump 2.0, thinking ahead, playing the game.
Yeah, it's like they're in a high-stakes chess match, planning out every single move.
It's exactly. Chinese think tanks, they're running all these simulations trying to predict Trump's next move. They know the U.S. could bring the pressure economically and diplomatically, maybe even try to isolate China from its allies.
So what are they doing to counter that?
They're working on strengthening ties with other regions, particularly Africa and Latin America. They've been investing heavily in infrastructure and development projects there, building strong economic partnerships.
Oh, so they're trying to make sure those relationships are solid.
Exactly, and they're also focusing on Southeast Asia. That region's becoming more and more important geopolitically.
So it's like building a network, a web of alliances to counter U.S. influence.
Precisely. And they're doing all this while also trying to boost their domestic economy. They know a strong internal market is crucial if they face a trade war with the U.S.
A two-pronged approach, bolstering their global standing and strengthening their home base. It makes sense. But will it be enough to withstand the pressure from Trump and his cabinet? That's the big question.
That's the wild card. Trump's a tough negotiator, but also unpredictable. He might strike a deal with China, but it'll probably come with some really tough demands.
Yeah, and with Rubio and Waltz advising him, I doubt those demands will be easy on China. It feels like we're watching a tug of war, both sides pulling hard and the rope's about to snap.
And then, just when you think it can't get any more complicated, Elon Musk enters the picture.
Hold on, what does Elon Musk have to do with all this? He's a tech guy, not a diplomat.
True, but he's got influence. Remember, he endorsed Trump during the election. Now that Trump's back, his voice carries even more weight.
So he's got Trump's ear, but how does that affect U.S.-China relations?
Well, think about it. Tesla Musk's company has a huge factory in Shanghai. His business interests in China are significant. He might use his relationship with Trump to push for a more balanced approach to trade, maybe even advocate for ending the trade war.
So he could be a moderating force, a voice of reason among the hawks in Trump's inner circle.
It's possible. But Trump's unpredictable. We don't know how much influence Musk will have, or if Trump will even listen to him. It just adds another layer of complexity to an already complex situation. It's like someone threw a wild card into the mix and we have no idea what's going to happen. But this brings up a crucial question. What are the implications for the rest of the world?
That's the key takeaway. This isn't just a disagreement between two superpowers. The tension between the U.S. and China will affect everyone. Other countries will have to choose sides or find their own way in a world that's becoming more and more polarized.
It's like a tectonic shift. The ground's moving beneath our feet and everyone's trying to find their balance.
Exactly. The outcome depends on so many decisions in Washington and Beijing, the influence of people like Musk and the strategies of other countries caught in the middle. The stakes are incredibly high, and they're getting higher.
It's a lot to take in, but that's why we're here to break it down and try to make sense of it all. And while the future's uncertain, one thing's for sure, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential economic and geopolitical storms brewing, but let's get real. How could this impact the average person, like us?
That's a great question. This isn't just some abstract game. It has real consequences for everyone. For starters, a full-blown trade war between the U.S. and China would probably mean higher prices for consumers in both countries.
So everyday things would cost more.
Exactly. Electronics, clothing, food, pretty much everything could get more expensive.
And it's not just prices, right? A trade war could disrupt those complex global supply chains we rely on. We could see shortages of certain goods. Remember the beginning of the pandemic when things like toilet paper and hand sanitizer were hard to find? A trade war could cause similar problems.
Absolutely. And then there's the impact on jobs. If companies in the U.S. and China have to deal with those tariffs, they might have to cut back or move production to other countries. That means job losses in both countries, causing real economic hardship for people.
So all this posturing and tough talk could have a real economic cost. It's not just a game, it's people's lives and livelihoods we're talking about.
It's exactly. And beyond the economic consequences, there's the issue of global security. Increased tension between these two superpowers could make the world a more dangerous place, increasing the risk of misunderstandings and even military conflict.
That's a scary thought. It feels like we're at a crossroads, and the choices made now could have huge consequences.
We are at a pivotal moment. That's why it's so important to stay informed, understand the situation, and talk about the best way forward.
So what can we do as individuals? How can we make a difference in all of this?
Staying informed is a good start. Read articles from different sources, look for different perspectives, have conversations with people who have different opinions. Be active and engaged citizens, not just passive observers.
I like that, becoming informed citizens, but is there anything else we can do? Can we actually have an impact?
Of course, supporting organizations that promote peace and understanding between the U.S. and China can make a difference. There are lots of groups doing good work, and they need our support. Even on a personal level, we can try to bridge divides in our own communities.
So if you have friends or family with strong opinions about China, talk to them respectfully, try to see their point of view. Maybe you can find some common ground.
It's about building bridges, not walls. It may seem small, but every effort matters.
That's a good point. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the future of U.S.-China relations and the future of the world isn't set in stone. The choices leaders make, the actions individuals take, and the desire for peace and understanding can all shape that future.
That's a powerful thought as we navigate this complex world. It's important to remember that even small actions can have a big impact. We'll be back after a short break to explore some potential scenarios and see what the future might hold for this crucial relationship. Okay, so we're back and ready to look at some possible scenarios here. Given all this tension, what are some ways things could go between the US and China?
One way is that it just keeps escalating. Like imagine a Cold War 2.0. More trade barriers, military buildup in the Pacific, that kind of thing. And a deeper ideological divide, of course, that would totally change global alliances. Other countries would have to pick a side.
That sounds pretty bad. What would that mean for, say, someone just living in the US?
Think about it. Your smartphone, your laptop, all that stuff, way more expensive because of tariffs on Chinese parts, or your clothes, the brands you like. Suddenly they're just not affordable anymore. Supply chains get messed up. In a Cold War 2.0, everyone feels the pain economically.
Yeah, not exactly a bright future. Are there any, more positive scenarios? Any chance of things calming down?
There's always the chance of a deal, right?
Yeah.
Like a grand bargain. Both sides give a little, find a way to coexist. It would take a lot of trust, a lot of diplomacy, which seems kind of rare these days, but it's not impossible.
So what would that even look like? What would each side have to give up?
For the U.S., it might mean easing up on some of those trade restrictions, maybe acknowledging China's economic power. They are a major player now. And for China, they'd probably have to address those concerns about intellectual property, and make it easier for foreign companies to do business there. It's a tough dance, for sure, but it could work out for everyone in the end.
Okay, and what about other countries? Like India, we talked about Geostar, how that might change things in the global media. Could India become like a major force in this US-China thing?
Absolutely. India's economy is growing, their military is getting stronger, and they're right there in the Indo-Pacific. They could be a balancer, forge their own path, and become super important in shaping the region.
So it's not just the US and China anymore. It's more like everyone's getting involved, a multipolar world.
Exactly. And that makes everything harder to predict. More players, more dynamics, more chances for both conflict and cooperation.
It's mind-boggling to think about all the possibilities, how it could all unfold. So as we wrap up, what's the main takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
The biggest thing is this. The future of U.S.-China relations, even the future of, the whole global order, it's not set in stone. It's shaped by what leaders do, what people do, whether countries can find common ground. It's complicated, always changing. But if we stay informed, if we talk about these things, if we push for peace and understanding, we can all play a role in making things better, a more stable future.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for joining us as we explored all the ins and outs of U.S.-China relations. Remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand what's going on in the world, the better we can handle the challenges and seize the opportunities. Until next time.